This is Practice Squadron. I'm Matthew, and thank you all for tuning in to the podcast / if you're watching this on YouTube. Thank you so much. Trying to do this every single day. So just to get everything out of the way, vice versa, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button down below. Definitely helps. Leave a comment in the comments section on, something that I can talk about tomorrow, sports-wise. And then also, if you're on YouTube, check me out. This podcast is also on Spotify, Google, Apple, pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. You can subscribe to it and then leave a review on, I believe iTunes, their podcast lets you leave reviews, things like that. And then also vice versa, like I was saying, if you're listening to this on a podcasting platform, check out the YouTube, Practice Squadron. I do a variety of different videos. I am trying to do more sports talk every day, trying to get in that habit. As you can see, did one yesterday, doing one today, I'll do one tomorrow. But also I do a lot of tech videos, a lot of card openings, things like that, things that interest me and things that I think people might be interested. So like I said, thank you all for watching. If you've seen the thumbnail or the description or the title or whatever it is that brought you here, we're talking about the San Antonio Spurs today. And just to give a little backstory on myself and my relationship with the Spurs. So, born in Boston, pretty much those Boston teams, they run through my blood. I got the Patriots, Red Sox, and the Celtics. I don't really follow NHL. I don't really even follow baseball, but when they're in the World Series and their merch, I always rep their merch. But moved here when I was 7. Back then I didn't know what sports, how big they were and things like that. And when you move to San Antonio, when their only sports, pro sports team is the Spurs, everybody loves the Spurs. And growing up, I went to a school that had uniforms, but when the Spurs were playing in the playoffs, they would let anybody not wear their uniform for a day, and they would let you put on your Spurs shirt or your Spurs jersey. So growing up, that happened a lot. The first time I didn't know what the Spurs were. And I believe I was like in 2nd or 3rd grade, and everybody came to school with the Spurs shirt on except me. I was in my uniform. And when you wear uniforms every day and somebody else is not wearing it, you get pretty jealous. So I told my mom, I was like, hey, I need to get a Spurs. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I needed it. And she got out and thanks to her, she got me a Manu Ginobili jersey. Back then, my family, they were into the Patriots. They weren't really into, basketball and things like that. But, they got me my number 20 jersey. And then, of course, growing up, I started playing basketball. Had to rep that number 20. But I really didn't follow them like that. You're a kid. You have other things on your mind. Video games, friends, things like that. But now flip it around. It's 2008, or I believe it was like 2006 actually, 2006, and my grandmother who lives in Boston, she sent me a Paul Pierce jersey. Well, my favorite color is green, and so I had to rep my new Paul Pierce jersey. And then right after that, they got KG and Ray Allen, and then my love for the Celtics just grew for them because they won their championship. And it's kind of similar to the uniform thing, but not really. It's like everybody here loves the Spurs. Well, now I got to rep my Celtics. I got to be different. I have to have a different take, a different pride thing. I like my favorite color is green, so I had to start repping them. And then, as I got older, I would follow them both. But the Celtics, I just follow more daily just because their two teams, and this is kind of where I'm getting at, are drastically different. So the Celtics are always reloading, and if you follow the Spurs, since the Greg Popovich era, that's not really what they're known for. They're known for sticking with the guys they have, drafting them, sending them to Austin to, learn the system and prove themselves, and then in 2 to 3 years, then they come over to the team, and it's just been that cycle. And this year in particular, very frustrated with the Spurs. Right now, they have a winning record, but the thing that worries me the most is that mentality that they don't try to reload. They don't try to really tinker too much. So, to give an example, we're in the bubble. Finally, I'm getting what I want. I'm seeing all these young guys who have been in Austin. I'm seeing them get valuable playing time. There's no LaMarcus. There's no Trey Lyles. There's no Patty Mills in the bubble. And honestly, in the bubble, they looked pretty good. So one would think, hey, maybe we don't need those guys. Maybe next year we'll retool, we'll get some new players in that kind of fit our needs, and then, we can progress. Maybe we can make the playoffs, what have you. Did the Spurs do that? No. To my knowledge, and I'm thinking real hard here. I feel like the only new piece that they have is Devin Vassell. And, he plays sometimes. He doesn't play all the time. He was their first-round draft pick this year. But while they are a small market team, I feel like they're also not trying to make leaps to get these free agents and to get these, these players that want to be traded away from their teams currently. They just don't want to do anything. And it's extremely frustrating, as a fan. And, as someone who's experienced all those championships, it's getting stale. And I think when people talk about small market teams, I think that comes up a lot, and especially with the Spurs, is it just gets stale after a while. Either you're in a small market that can't win, or you're in, let's just say the Spurs, where for so long you've been winning and you don't want to change it, and it just gets kind of boring. But to kind of what brought me to this podcast, topic of today, is I feel like due to my background with the Spurs and my relationships with the Celtics and things like that, I feel like I am in a unique fan position in the sense that I love the Spurs, I want them to win, but I'm also realistic with my expectations. I'm realistic on what do I see around the league and how teams are performing versus what the Spurs do and how they're performing. So specifically in San Antonio, like I was saying, when I grew up, everybody had Spurs, shirts and jerseys and things like that. And I think that kind of fandom, specifically in San Antonio, when it's the only sports team, is it kind of blinds you to like what's really going on. It kind of blinds you in the sense that, the Spurs are going to win every single game because I want them to win. And we've been winning for so long, so we're just going to keep winning. And I think in the past few years, things are changing for the Spurs. And both in good ways and in bad. But I was talking to my friend Jonathan, and, he is one of those fans that he watches every single game. And he's like, of course we're going to beat this team and so on have you. And I hit him with that reality check sometimes. And it happens a lot with the players on the team. Is I feel like Spurs fans overrate their players. Like they think that they're better than they really are. Or like the progression of the sense. So I can just give you an example. Jaylen Brown and DeJounte Murray in the same draft, were they drafted in the same, one's a top 3 pick and one's not, but the progression we've seen with Jaylen Brown over, the course of the years, far greater in my opinion than in DeJounte Murray. And I could say that with a lot of the players on the Spurs. I think a lot of them they could be good, but their progression just isn't as fast enough. And I don't know if that's due to Pop or Austin or what have you, but I feel like we're kind of, the progression isn't there, and I think one of the players in my mind that I think of the most is Jakob Poeltl. Like when Jakob Poeltl was acquired by the Spurs in the Kawhi Leonard trade, a lot of people are like, oh, like he's still developing, and it's like he was also in the Jaylen Brown draft, and it's gotten to the point where I'm like, this is what he is. He's not going to get any better, and he's not really contributing to the wins. He's a defensive, and I say defensive very loosely. He's a defensive center that is unathletic and cannot score around the basket. In the modern NBA, that's not what you need. If you're going to be a defensive center, you need to be athletic, and you need to be able to finish around the rim. You need to be able to get lobs and things like that. You need to be able to run in down the court, and that's just not Jakob Poeltl, and I really don't know why the Spurs gave him the contract that they did. Now, when there were other centers out there like Tristan Thompson, who I think is way better, who got way less money than Jakob Poeltl, and it's not just with him, it's with a lot of the players. And I think a lot of the fans were against Kawhi Leonard leaving. And what I mean by that, I think they were against Kawhi Leonard because he left or because he wanted to leave. And they didn't really understand that the Spurs really weren't trying to, actively build around them. One of the stories that came out was that he wanted Paul George on the Spurs. That's shaking up the Spurs. So what if some picks have to go and some players have to go? That's Paul George on the Spurs, a really good defensive player and an amazing scorer with Kawhi Leonard, who in my mind at the time was a top 5 player in the league. So that's just how I feel about the Spurs. Other Spurs fans, how I'm different. So I'm going to give you different takes. But to bring it all back a little bit, what kind of brought this up and what I'm going to go through now is a realistic take on who I think the Spurs can win. And I also want this on record because I want to look back at this at the end of... I know we're not doing the full season right now. It's only the first half. But I want to go on record and see how well I'm going to do. I'm not going to tally up what I think their record is. I'm just going at the top of my... I have the list of the teams that they play coming up, and what sparked this is I told my friend Jonathan that the Spurs were going to lose to the Warriors, and of course in every Spurs fan fashion he told me how wrong I was, and yes. And of course this video is coming out the day after the Spurs just got blown out by the Warriors, so I mean, definitely feeling myself a little bit. Don't feel too bad, Jonathan, if you're listening to this. I'm sure there are other Spurs fans out there, but like I said, I'm a different breed of Spurs fans. I follow them, but I'm just more realistic on my takes and their expectations. So, one thing I did say the other day when I told him that the Spurs were going to lose to the Warriors, I said that they were going to beat the Dallas Mavericks, and I do believe that they play tomorrow. January 22nd, I think they're going to beat the Mavericks. I think the Mavericks are very streaky. I think that their bench is awful. I think you have Luka, and that's pretty much it. They really, to me, they're not scary. They're not going to win it all this year. The Mavericks just don't have it. While I do think Porzingis is good, he's extremely fragile, and he's not going to make it. They're just wasting Luka, in my opinion. They really do need to build around him, and Tim Hardaway Jr. isn't getting it done either. So I do think that they will beat the Mavericks. Hot take, I think that they lose to the Wizards. The Wizards have that firepower, and I know that the Spurs don't. While the Wizards don't have any defense, I do think that they'll be able to outscore the Spurs. New Orleans, I think they beat. I think New Orleans, in my mind, in a lot of people's minds, I think that New Orleans should be better than they really are. While they are young and athletic, they're very streaky. I wouldn't rely on them to much less make the playoffs than actually, go far in it. So New Orleans, I think that's a dub. Boston on the 27th. I'm going Boston. I think Jason Tatum will be back by then. He's supposed to come back on the 22nd. This is a big game for me personally due to all the backstory I gave in the beginning of the podcast and the video. I'm going to go Boston mostly because Boston is my number one. The Spurs are my number two. But I don't think that they have a lot of answer to a lot of the Spurs or a lot of the Celtics players, I should say. While a lot of them are around the same age, I do think that the Celtics players are just more, advanced in the fact that they've been playing with each other longer. I think they have more playoff experience, and I think all of that has brought them together, and I do think that the Celtics are going to win. Denver, though, I think is going to be a close game. I think they lose to Denver. So while at this point in time, Denver is not in the playoff picture, I do think that Denver will beat them. Memphis, though, they're going to beat Memphis. Let's be honest, Memphis is hit with injuries. They do have Ja Morant, but we're talking, over a week from now. Who knows? So I do think that they're going to beat Memphis. Memphis last year surprised a lot of people. They weren't going to go anywhere in the playoffs, even if they got in. And, yeah. So, they're going to beat Memphis. And they play them twice, and I think that they're going to beat them twice. Minnesota, I think that they will beat just because Minnesota's awful. I know they got D'Angelo Russell, but that team is not good. It's not good. And the Spurs should beat them. They really should. They have Karl-Anthony Towns, and that's it. And honestly, Karl-Anthony Towns probably won't even be on this team potentially this summer or next year. Next year, he's getting traded. He's going to demand a trade and get out of Minnesota. And really, he's not built to be that guy, like the number one option on his team. He's going to go join another team, and that's just how I feel. So they'll beat Minnesota. Houston, they're going to take that L. We're talking Houston on February 6th. That's like not a whole month, probably half a month to, get Victor Oladipo in that system. John Wall is getting back to where he once was. DeMarcus Cousins, I do think that their bench unit is better than advertised. I think Eric Gordon, still good. House, or not House, who am I thinking of? I'm trying to blank here. Who am I thinking of? Oh, Christian Wood. Christian Wood is a beast. Like, let's be honest. They're gonna lose to Houston. I'm just gonna put this on. Now, Golden State, they play them twice on February 8th, February 9th. I'm gonna take it that they'll win one of the games. I don't know which one. I think they'll win one. I think that they lose the other. I think it could just be an off night for Steph Curry on one of the nights, and the other night they're going to be on fire. The interesting thing about the Warriors is while they were awful last year, I do think that they have the pieces this year not to go far in the playoffs or anything. They'll probably be like that 8th or that 7th seed. But I do like the combination of Oubre and Wiggins. Wiggins, Draymond Green is kind of feeling himself back up. James Wiseman is the center that they needed. And, Steph Curry's going to shoot. That's what he's going to do. And, while he can be streaky at times, and if you're a Steph Curry fan listening to that, he can. He can be streaky. Don't lie to yourself. I do think that he's going to pull it together in one of the two games. So, take it for that. Atlanta's interesting. I think that they can beat Atlanta, but also I know how well, or like the controversy around Trae Young right now and his free throws that he gets by having the defender trail him and him stopping and bumping into them. Will that continue in a month? Who knows? Is the officiating going to crack down on that? I hope so, because as Steve Nash said, that's not even basketball. So, but I do think that they'll be able to beat the Hawks. Then they play Charlotte. I think they'll be able to beat Charlotte, even though I predict Gordon Hayward to go off during that game. Detroit is also a dub, so they're going to beat Detroit. Cleveland's interesting, guys, and this Cleveland has a lot of players people want. And let me tell you this, if the trade deadline is happening in February like it usually happens, then could be kind of interesting. Could be interesting how Cleveland unloads some of their bigs, but I do think that they're going to get the dub in Cleveland. New York, they're going to take that L. New York, I think, is going to beat the Spurs. Their team is it's weirdly constructed, but for some reason it's working for them, so I really can't hate. While I do think New York isn't built to last long term, as like when the second half of the season goes on and into the playoffs, right now I think they're good. And right now, to my knowledge, their pieces are kind of fitting together. But we do need to start a petition on a petition to free Dennis Smith Jr. from that team. Indiana, I think that they'll win. Not really going to go into detail about that. I just think that they're going to win. OKC, they'll win because they're tanking. New Orleans, again, I think that they lose on February. Kind of the Steph Curry reason on that is, I think that they'll be bad one time and then good the other time. And I do think they'll probably be better later on in the season like they were last year. Brooklyn, they're going to lose. And then I think that they'll probably beat New York for that same reason. For New Orleans and the Golden State Warriors. They'll beat New York on March 2nd. Like I said, I do think New York is going to get worse over time, and then I do think that the Spurs will beat OKC March 4th. So while I don't have the record, because I was just going down the list, I will come back to this video and I will listen to the audio and we'll see how well I am. I do think that I'll be close to what I just said. Do I think I'll be perfect? No. If I am perfect, that's an awkward skill to have. I can't win the lottery, but I can guess how many games the Spurs are going to win. So, I don't know. And Jonathan, if you're listening, just know that I'm pretty sure I'll be more right than you. Like I said, I'm feeling myself after that Warriors win when I said the Spurs were going to lose. Well, as always, guys, make sure you leave a comment in the comments section. Give me tips on what you want me to talk about tomorrow or the next day or next week. Definitely a good way to spark conversations. Also, hit me up on Twitter. All that stuff is in the link in the description, but my Twitter is PracticeSquadron. And then, like I said, if you're following this on a podcast format, check out the channel. You won't be disappointed. Or at least I hope you won't. And then if you're watching this video on YouTube, subscribe to the podcast. Maybe you won't have internet one day. Or, I don't know, maybe you won't have a lot of data to stream the videos. But you can see me on that podcast or listen to me on that podcast. P.S. Can the Spurs please make some moves by the deadline this year? Please. Just give me what I want. I promise. I promise you won't regret it. Please.